making a video. Delusions Exist. Bureau. Just it's all this psychology stuff about groupthink, essentially, and you know how we just define or describe this best mode of human perspective. And he argues in defense of this idea of skepticism, which, in my opinion, is demonstrable as archaic. It's an archaic way of approaching the world, because we don't live in a world where we just guess at reality. So they used to just guess. You know, they would say it's thunder. Okay, they would say, oh, the boogeyman made it. Or the bogeyman. Or Thor. Or, they would just make bad guesses. And so, yeah, it was rational to be skeptical because people were just making it up, essentially. They didn't really have any evidence to put together. They just had the tiniest bits of circumstantial evidence, but very little hard evidence of anything. And clearly, through our maturation, you know, we were in kindergarten, right, 20,000 years ago. And then we graduated to the, we made to the first grade and the second grade, and you can just migrate you right up and say there's a point when you're become an adult that you can't just behave like a kid in kindergarten. You can't just knock things over because you don't like the way they look. You can't just pretend make-believe friends and stuffed animals, and you just can't play the game that way anymore. You have to grow up. And I would argue that these intellectuals playing this skeptical game, like there's reason for a great deal of skepticism when there really isn't, not scientifically. And the part where you should be skeptical, he's as much a group thinker as anyone, a name dropper. Feynman says so. He'll make those kinds of arguments. And so he's, it's hypocrisy, and worse, it's duplicity, because the stuff he's pretending there's reason to be skeptical, spiritualism, free will, these are dead subjects for an intellectual. For somebody who's going to be intellectually honest, there's no way to get away from it. Okay, there's no UFOs, there's no spiritual ether, there's no energy reading between minds. There's nothing but program psychology. And part of a reasonable program psychology, a reasonably educated one, recognizes these vulnerabilities to believing because it feels good, it sounds good. It's a lie that makes you feel good about something or better about yourself, and that's a corruption. And we kind of know that vulnerability exists, and recognizing it, we say, yes, okay, we can't look at the evidence and make it point where we want it to point. We have to see where it actually points. And like I said, he doesn't seem to wish to apply his notion of skepticism to the only place where I think it's warranted, and that is the quantum mechanical wave theory mumbo-jumbo, the unraveling of the material universe into wishy-washy Heisenberg uncertainties that logically can be understood for what they are, which is the fact that, yeah, we can't see everything. We don't have a videotape, but we can construct one out of the evidence that's going to be pretty damn close to reality if we choose to be honest and say, well, what are the real facts and where they really point to? And I don't think any of these people are willing to do much of that. So anyway, I just want to counter-argue his his premise that there's any truth to this notion that the human race is forever ignorant, I think that's just idiotic. I think we've gleaned in the 20,000 years, or at least 10,000 years of civilization, we've gleaned a ton of experimental data, information, and you're not going to undo these truths. There's no point in being skeptical about the round earth theory or the earth revolving around the sun theory. No reason to be skeptical about any of that crap. It's over. There's no room for skepticism anymore. And most of the facts of our existence, I would argue, are already in that category where you can't rationally argue them anymore. There's no rational argument with religious people. It's an irrational faith, period. There's no evidence. None. Zero. And any indication of it, even the idea of it, has zero credibility. The source sucks. Testimony. Yeah. I believed in God and I felt His Spirit. Well, fuck you. You know, really. Why don't you tell me about what you felt when somebody stuck a butt plug up your ass? That's just silly.
Have to adjust their thinking. And the fact is, dogmatists do adjust their thinking. They adjust quite a bit. Dogmas evolve over time. Christianity evolves over time.
Okay, well, how has Einstein evolved? How has your Feynman quantum rigidity evolved at all? It doesn't seem like you're willing to do any of this evolving with the evidence, and recognizing that how to put this one, the evidence is suspect. What you're clinging to, and I've shown some of that. I mean, the fact that Feynman doesn't recognize single slit diffraction, little simple things that just point out how you can't claim an experiment proves something when you're not being honest about what the experiment results actually are. That's just kind of a bogus kind of skepticism, a reverse skepticism, which is pretty much a dogma.
It changes, and it changes from place to place, changes from year to year.
Yeah, who cares? Silly ideas get sillier or get different silly elements. It just doesn't, there's no credibility in any of that nonsense. So what's the difference what Christianity does? And what we're talking about is our understanding of the nature of existence. And I'm just saying that, Darwin spelled out the evidence. The evidence was convincing, in my opinion, was pretty much undisputable 200 years ago. And now it's so unavoidable in the direction it points. I mean, we're just the new version of flatworm. We're just mechanical organisms with a program, motivational mechanism, built out of sensation, and a judgment passing or thinking machine that just does logical equations like, I don't want to run into a tree. So it augments my program to know to avoid trees. I have to go to the left or the right. Can't go through it. So yeah, we gain information. We have a motivation to get from here to there, and we learn how to go around trees. But as a diagram, that's all we are. And we're going to keep, not as a species, as a race, as a kind, humankind is not going to get to that truth if the intellectuals keep placating the imbeciles. They keep saying, oh yeah, the imbeciles are doing just fine. No, they're not. They're fucking imbeciles, and they should be called imbeciles. And the intellectuals shouldn't be engaging in imbecilic behavior, which is, I'm going to pretend we don't already have answers to all these questions and play life as if I can play it as a 4-year-old, so I can go ahead and wet my pants or poo my pants. I can do whatever the fuck I want, essentially, and not recognize what I'm part of. The fact is that I'm not an individual. I am it's a Borg, whether you like it or not. And you can be either the thing that moves the Borg in a direction, you can either be instrumental to making it a good Borg, or you can make it a bad Borg, but you can't un-Borg. The game is Borg. There's no separate game. You are what your species is.
And so just the whole idea of these ideologies that think that they're like this rock solid foundation and I need something to be true to.
Yeah, well, evolution is
reliable.
Yeah, evolution is a rock solid foundation. Chemistry, biology, physics has a lot of stuff, a lot of fact built into it now. And it's not dogma. They're not just statements out of nothing. They're statements out of tons of evidence. We know the relationship between gravity and mass. You know, these relationships exist. They're solid. Not exactly the mechanism. All right, that's where there's plenty of dispute. And ironically, like I said, you don't think there is any room for dispute there. All of a sudden, your skepticism disappears in this very nuanced, and the places where there's the thinnest evidence seems to be the places where you have the least skepticism, and the places where there's the most certain evidence, which is there's no free will, you seem mushy and not vacuous, but vacillating.
Yeah, they don't like skepticism. Skepticism doesn't know enough of everything.
So again, skepticism that wouldn't be the critique of skepticism. The whole point is you're claiming there's reason to say we don't understand. You're the one claiming your ignorance. I'm really claiming there's a ton of evidence, and to pretend you're ignorant of the rule that you don't piss on somebody else's head. It's just plain stupid. The fact that you pretend to be ignorant of the idea that you really don't have any business eating other sentient animals if they're going to be tortured for the creation of your food. That logic is just inescapable. So what do? You apply your convenient skepticism to say, I'm not going to pay attention to that fact, that a mammal brain is a mammal brain is a mammal brain, and that it's how smart it is doesn't have a damn thing to do with how much it's going to hurt if you shove a stick up its ass. You're just going to keep pretending that somehow it does. That sometimes somehow it'd be okay if we treated little baby humans the way we treat little baby piglets. And you know that wouldn't be okay. So why is it okay for piglets? Why? You don't have a rational answer. You don't have a rational excuse. You just hide under your little skeptical rock and say, I don't know the truth there. It's too complicated for me to figure out. Humans are special. I just say so. There, I'm a skeptic, but, I just make up a truth now and then and just declare it. Humans are more important than pigs. I say so. Human babies. One of the most comatose living organisms on Earth. They're important. 2-year-old human, wow, important. Fully grown pig, not important. How does skepticism fit in there? All I see is of skeptics perverting reality and saying there's some excuse not to recognize that basic and fundamental truth. Pretend there's some sort of God of the gaps that just declares humans moreness. We're obviously moreness, especially when we're 2 years old. We're so fucking moreness. I don't think so. So I call bullshit.
But they're changing their system to accommodate evidence generally that other dogmatists either show than the skeptics now that skepticism, epistemology.
Well, look, there's not even any evidence of this as being a truth anyway, that religions are getting anything else but more retarded and fundamentalist in bulk in terms of the new converts. And it's just the old lagger-oners, the clinger-toers, they're the ones that are moderating their fanaticism. but we can obviously see the energy of the fanatic in the Middle East. And you don't see much change in those monsters.
Doesn't even matter that whether most scientists consider themselves skeptics or not, or understood skeptical philosophy.
Yeah, well, again, why should a scientist deny facts? I'm just saying there's no reason to be skeptical for the sake of skepticism. It's just stupid. You only really should be skeptical if there's reason to believe you've been tricked or lied to, that there's some fraud, or that there's just some blatant propaganda. Everybody else is saying, everybody else is jumping off the cliff, so I guess I should. Yeah, well, I should be able to figure out that, well, that doesn't seem right. Doesn't make any sense. Everybody else is eating pigs. I should assume that they know what they're doing. No, there's reason to say, hey, that doesn't logically make any sense. I'm not going to do that because everybody else is doing that. Well, that's reason to be skeptical, but you're saying the evidence doesn't match the conclusion. But this idea that I should just be, this blanket liberty to play skeptic game, I'm just saying you're just giving the ignoramus license to pretend and to not have to obey the truth. You're giving the ignoramus the right to perpetuate some notion of free will, some notion that they made themselves great. Some ego bullshit, that they aren't byproduct, that they're somehow magical product. And all of those perceptions are just so corrosive to people understanding their obligation to the civilization that made them. Civilization makes us. This is why that's why I make arguments about the toxic junk food they're feeding children, because everybody wants the liberty to be an asshole, and they don't want to admit that, yeah, they wouldn't make somebody who's an alcoholic. Yeah, they're already stuck with it. They're already caught up in it. But they should have enough sense to say, I wouldn't give that gift, to the next generation. Why would you? Knowledge imposes responsibility. It doesn't feed skepticism. It should be feeding a rational recognition that you're just heading for a brick wall with a big pit right underneath it. You're just burying yourself in bullshit to think you can use skepticism as some method of picking and choosing the truth that makes you feel better, and that's all you're using it for. You're not applying skepticism, like I said, because there's reason to doubt. You're applying it because you don't want to hear the truth. That's really the point of this video. Like I said, I shouldn't need to say all this shit to say that. But that's my accusation, that skeptics are just weasels evading reality. Because skepticism really doesn't have any place except for when you have reason to be skeptical. And most of the things we have reason to be skeptical of is most of pop culture. And that's not where you're pointing your guns. And as long as the intellectuals keep not doing anything constructive, anything deliberate, because they keep thinking it's all going to take care of itself, it's somehow self-correcting. That's one of their dogmatic fables. It's not going to happen that way. Nothing's going to get fixed unless you say, I'm going to fix it. You have to pick up a shovel and you have to whack some old ladies in the head with it, or something like that, metaphorically. You have to do some things that are unpleasant, and you're all too caught up in playing your ego game to recognize that obligation. You have janitorial duties here. You're just using skepticism to say, I rather wear Jedi suit instead. And that's not the job as a smart person. Anyway, so you're just an idiot. I guess that's the other point of the video. Skepticism is bullshit, and you people are idiots. There, that's about it. Enough. Until next time.